In the wake of the power paddle fallout, there's been a surge in these paddles that I like to call Goldilocks paddles. These are paddles that perform very consistently across all aspects of the game and are paddles that I feel like anybody could transition to and use very comfortably right away. The Core's Shapeshifter quickly emerged as one of these paddles for me, but also very interestingly burst onto the scene completely out of left field. I had a chance to sit down with Matt Cox, the founder of Core's Pickleball, to discuss why the Shapeshifter was performing so well, and I'll link that full interview up above. But when it came down to his guiding development process and how the Shapeshifter came to be, the story sounded so bizarre and completely different from the way that 99.9% of paddle companies do their R&D nowadays. So by the end of this review, you'll know everything you need to know about the Core's Shapeshifter, and how this paddle should appeal to such a wide range of you who are looking for a new paddle right now, especially in the current climate when it's so important to be supporting small paddle companies. So let's talk about it. At first glance, the Core's Shapeshifter looks like your average hybrid control paddle. But I'm going to throw up the stats I collected about the paddle on the screen, and I'm going to briefly describe how they led me to believe this paddle had a lot more promise. Also note that Core's completely sold out their first batch of Shapeshifters, but if you're watching this review on June 22nd, 2024, or within a few days, because I suspect these will go quickly, then the second batch is live and available for orders, and I'll have a link in the description that directly applies my code RAFA for a nice discount at checkout. I like to compare my expectations based on paddle stats in comparison to the average paddle that you're likely to see on the Core daily, much like the 6-0 Double Black Diamond or the Yola Gen 2s or the Selkirk SLK Halos. The Shapeshifter is a Gen 2 paddle, meaning that it's been thermoformed and foam injected along the perimeter. Twist weight is also generally a measurement of stability when hitting off-center shots with the paddle. And with this boasting a twist weight of 6.7, it nearly puts it in the elite tier stability for me, which I generally cut off at 6.8. And with this combination of characteristics, I was not only expecting control in terms of soft game and shot accuracy to be above average, but sweet spot size as well, as this generally tends to be correlated with twist weight, but not always. Shapeshifter is also one-piece unibody constructed and has a balance point 9.41 inches up from the end of the handle, making it a head-heavy paddle, and likely contributes to its high swing weight of 119, making it feel a little bit heavier than the average paddle to swing. Generally, head-heavy high swing weight paddles should feel pretty slow in the hands. However, what you lose in hand speed, you should gain in power in comparison to the average paddle. And that's only supplemented by one of the layers of the face sheets being fiberglass, which is intended to supplement that power. The other two face layers are comprised of carbon fiber. Most importantly, the top layer is Toray 3D 18K raw carbon fiber, which is indicated by the 3D cube pattern that you see. Now, this weave is not only the most expensive you can put on a paddle on a market, but it's intended to give much higher spin numbers than your average paddle with painted on grit or your standard Toray T700 raw carbon fiber. And finally, this paddle has a grip length of 5.3 inches, but claims that you can overwrap this up to 5.5 inches, which is my minimum length requirement to be able to comfortably fit two hands for the average person. So keeping this data in mind, I went out to discover which of these expectations would hold up in the on-court performance. So starting off with the control, the soft game and accuracy of shots that you can achieve with this paddle is truly outstanding. This is not only, in my experience, top 3 most stable hybrid paddles I've ever tested in terms of ability to execute dinks and resets, but the shot accuracy somehow matches that of a pure control paddle like a Selkirk Lux. The paddle face feels very plush with a large and forgiving sweet spot. It is slightly shifted upward due to the taper on the paddle head that was popularized by 6-0. However, the miss hits that you generally receive on the bottom end of the paddle towards the handle with a shape like this were pretty minimal. Moving on, I honestly think the power and pop of this paddle generally fall more into the average category for me. I will say I was able to achieve ball speeds of up to 54.1 miles per hour with this paddle, and I had several 4.0 to 4.5 plus skill level friends try this paddle and discuss its power levels. To me, with the current pure power paddles left on the market, being the new Paddletechs, the new Engages, and the Gearbox Pro Series paddles, with the levels that they're able to achieve, the goalposts for an above average power paddle have been shifting constantly, and for me, this paddle just doesn't quite fit into that category anymore. So if you're thinking you'll get this head heavier, slightly higher swing weight paddle, which definitely does feel slower at the net for hand battles, but you're going to hit power levels that are going to approach that of a high level power paddle, that's definitely not what you're going to get. That doesn't mean, though, that the power and pop levels are bad. In fact, they're exactly in the range that I think would be perfect for somebody looking to upgrade in their paddle or find some more consistency in their play. I'm definitely with Chris Olsen at the Pickleball Studio that power paddles are severely overrated for the vast majority of players. Now, when we're talking about spin, I do think this paddle barely sneaks into the above average category and met my expectations there. This is another area where newer paddles are continuing to push the boundaries up and up. But for me, right now, I'm still willing to put 2,000 RPMs as the cutoff for an elite level spin paddle. And this paddle was able to achieve spin levels on average of 2,049 RPM. Part of the reason I think this paddle wasn't able to go even more towards the high end of the spin spectrum is because a fine peel ply was used as opposed to a coarse peel ply that's used on paddles like the Volair Mach 2s and the Pickle Vantage Pros. But with this level of spin, I was definitely able to execute a lot of shots with a high level of finesse and was able to eliminate a lot of issues I would have with the average paddle in terms of hitting balls out. And then lastly, when we get to the grip length, I think this paddle was definitely exactly down the middle in terms of meeting my expectations for enough room for two-handed backhands. I like to put one finger on the back end of the paddle to execute those shots, and I generally felt like my hands were comfortable. Not the most comfortable I felt, but also definitely not scrunched, and I have average to larger hand size. So this is my full comprehensive analysis of the paddle performance, and through this you can start to see why I would call this a Goldilocks paddle. With the slight exception of hand speed, which was on the slower end but nowhere near the slowest that I've experienced, this paddle does everything at an average to above average level. I'm a huge believer that the vast majority of players should not be looking for a paddle that can do one thing extremely well at the cost of other characteristics, but rather have that one paddle that can perform at the minimum consistently across all categories. As a matter of fact, the only reason why the Honolulu J2K became my most recommended paddle nowadays over the Core's Shapeshifter is because that paddle possesses a lower swing weight and a slightly lower balance point, making it a little bit faster at the net. That's literally it. Well, that, and I gotta admit, I am not a fan of stock ribbed grips. If you're a paddle company watching this, please do not put this type of grip on your paddle. But the positive thing is that this feedback was received so much by Chorus that they've eliminated it on batch 2 and all future batches. So we finally come down to the question of which type of player should go out and buy this paddle. My recommendation is always literally any player that is currently on the market for a new paddle and for whom hand speed is not the absolute paramount characteristic you're looking for in a paddle. This is one of those paddles that when I was playtesting, I found very difficult to put down just because of how well I was playing with it right off the bat. And when I talked with Matt about how he was able to achieve this, he gave me a really shocking answer. A lot of companies base the vast majority of their R&D on what types of other paddles on the market are very popular, and therefore what type of characteristics customers are generally looking for in their paddle, and then figuring out how to integrate those into their own product. But when I spoke with Matt about what the inspiration was for the Shapeshifter, he told me right off the bat that he just made a paddle that he liked. Not that he obviously didn't go through multiple prototypes and go through lots of feedback from the community, but that was the guiding principle from the beginning, was that he wanted to make a paddle that he would use on a daily basis. And that sort of unique approach to developing pickleball paddles doesn't stop there. You'll notice on the stats page that I showed you earlier in the video that I put a little section where the frequency of 368 Hz was displayed. Without getting too into the weeds here, because this could take a whole separate video, Matt looked into the science that suggests that your paddle should emit a certain frequency when a ball strikes the sweet spot. And you can therefore use that to sort of optimize your sweet spot area. Matt has a very creative and music-driven background in general, but the very fact that he was just making a paddle that felt right to him, and that essentially is using music to optimize the sweet spot on his paddles, just absolutely blew my mind. And so that summarizes my thoughts on the Chorus Shapeshifter. I think there's a lot to be excited about in terms of the future R&D for Chorus. And then the consistency of the play of the paddle really makes it a super easy recommendation to the vast majority of people I meet on a daily basis. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it or you learned something, and comment down below if you'll be going and getting the Shapeshifter for yourself, or if you already have. Remember, my link down in the description will directly apply my code RAFA for a nice discount at checkout, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.